Welcome back to Let's Talk Careers. My name is Miss V, and I am so excited to bring another incredible guest. Today, we are meeting with David Hawkins, who is the founder of the University Guys. Welcome to Let's Talk Careers, David.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you. Tell us where you are in the world right now and what it looks like on your side of the planet.
So I'm in the UK, in the middle of England, in the county of Leicestershire, about an hour and a half north of London, and it is England in October. So it is grey and damp, and the leaves are a beautiful colour of orange.
Fabulous. I love it. I love it. I love the opportunities of traveling through Zoom, of course, but obviously being able to tap into parts of the world that we probably never could have pre-pandemic without getting onto an airplane. Yep. David, I have so many questions about the University Guys, the work that you do, how you help the youth. But before we do that, I'd like to take you back to when you were a student, probably around that time of choosing GCSEs and when you were thinking about courses and how they'd make sense for you. I know that you were interested in history, but tell us how history connected the dots for you and how it led you to your current role as the founder of a university counseling program.
Yeah, I mean, for me, looking back and doing the work that I do, I think for a lot of us, we go back and we question where it came from. I was in the very English educational system, which, as you know, and a lot of the viewers will know, is a very kind of narrow focus, and was in that sense of, you pick something to study at university. I, from a relatively early age, wanted to go into teaching. I enjoyed school. My teachers seemed to enjoy school. And I was lucky enough to go to schools which weren't just about the classes, but also had a big focus on extracurricular activities, very kind of traditional English kind of education. So I loved playing sport and doing music and drama. And my teachers seemed to have a lot of fun, both sort of coaching sports and doing those things and teaching classes. And thought, well, that's for me. And as I was going through secondary school, I was pretty good at a lot of the subjects, really enjoyed the humanities, and had a really wonderful history teacher in year 9, so the year before choosing my GCSEs. Before that, I'd always thought I had to pick geography as my GCSE humanity. Most schools, certainly back then, would say do history or geography. And I remember about 2 weeks before the end of the year going, actually, you know what, I'll do history. I quite like that history teacher, but he seems fun. And ended up choosing that as one of my sort of 3 options in GCSE. Had, again, through my GCSE years, a really wonderful history teacher. Who's very young, came straight out of the University of Durham, coached me rugby, coached me cricket, etc. He seemed to have a wonderful life. He's now the head of IB at Sevenoaks School. And so fell in love then with the idea of history. Loved the fact that, and it's ironic doing the work that I do now, history was kind of a vehicle for studying everything. That if it had happened in the past, I could study it because it was history. I didn't know about things like the liberal arts style of education. And so from my GCSEs into then choosing my A-levels, which then in the UK system, you would typically do 4. It's now normally 3, but I was in the process where you had sort of the modular AS and A-level system. And chose history and then 3 other A-levels that kind of sort of wrapped around history. I did German, music and theatre studies. But from about age 15 onwards, it was history I was going to study. That was going to be my thing. I was going to do a history degree, then qualify as a teacher, and then go and teach, which is kind of what I did until life took a segue and I found myself as a careers and university guidance counsellor.
I loved how you unwrapped it for us. I love how you brought us back, and I kept hearing that you were looking to your influencers who were your teachers and gaining that confidence of they seem to enjoy what they're doing. I really enjoy this subject. And it almost sounded like they were not just influencers of a subject, but also of a profession. And it made you interested in wanting to go down that path. For young people thinking, well, if he wanted to be a teacher so bad, why didn't he just go straight to do an education degree? Why did he do history and then go on and do what he needed to do to teach? How did you create that decision-making process for yourself? And why did you choose I love this subject, but I know that I'm going to use this subject to teach and not just go straight to do your education degree.
Yeah, and this is where I think, the work that you and I do is quite important, because that would be a question that would be a good one if your familiarity with how this works is the US context, or indeed other places where that would be the route. And that's not the context in the UK. And so much of the work that we do with young people is unpacking maybe the assumptions that they've made, which aren't necessarily the case. In the UK context, if I'd gone and studied an education degree at university, I would not have been able to go and teach in a secondary school, because I wouldn't have a subject that I was qualified in to teach. So the standard route, certainly then, and mostly now, though it's slightly different, to teach in a secondary school level is that you study a subject for your undergraduate degree, and then you go and do a teaching qualification. So I then did a postgraduate certificate in education for a year after my undergraduate degree, which gave me qualified teacher status.
And I appreciate you bringing that up. So a young person, unless they understand not only that they want to be a teacher, but also how they want to teach. So instead of teaching in primary education, did you know at that young age that specifically you wanted to teach at secondary? Was that something that you absolutely knew for certain, or were you just thinking, I want to be a teacher?
Yeah, I mean, I would sort of clarify even further. And at the time, I didn't know, but going through my career in education, sort of, I would now say, actually, I wanted to be a schoolmaster, which is a very kind of old British term. But I loved being in the classroom, and I loved teaching history. But actually, I didn't want to just do that. And I remember having these conversations when I was doing my teacher training qualification with other people on my course about the sort of schools I was applying for jobs in. And they wanted to teach. They wanted to be in the classroom. And I loved doing that, but I wanted all the other things as well. So I did want to coach sports. I did want to be involved in the wider life of the school. I wanted to be involved in boarding. So actually, most of the schools I applied for, and the school I then taught at for 7 years, were boarding schools. So it wasn't just the idea of the engagement with the subject. It was the wider life of young people's development. And for me, that was going to be secondary education. And actually, as my teaching career progressed, and even now what I do now, I started working with sort of the older end of the cohort. So the school I worked at actually only taught students from 14 upwards. In my last couple of years, I was in effect really only teaching 16 upwards. And now in my profession as a university advisor, I'm in effect really only dealing with 17 and 18-year-olds. And that felt to me more like my skill set. When I taught younger students, particularly in my training year, and I'd had a gap year also doing some teaching in a junior school, I found that students getting to age 13 or 14 were only just getting to the bit where I found them interesting.
Interesting. That is very interesting. Okay, now take us on the journey from deciding that I'm going to do this full time. When did you know that you were ready to take that next career leap? And I ask you this question, David, for two reasons. One, because whenever I work with young people, I always talk about career progression. And we discuss that, when you start your career, you might start at point A, but then life throws opportunities at you and you might grow and evolve, but you definitely want to be looking at that career progression. And my second question, because there might be teachers watching this right now thinking, I feel like I need to do something else in my career. I want to kind of evolve and grow. So this is an opportunity for a teacher, an educator thinking, what can be that next step for me? So when did you decide that you were going to take the leap? And how did you find the courage to take the leap?
Yeah, I think a lot about this when I talk to students, and obviously our focus is university guidance. So don't put the cart before the horse, a wonderful sort of English idiom. Don't do something because you need this in 5 years' time at the sake of doing things that aren't right for you now. So I've always, myself and always counsel my students, make the decision that makes sense to you now and let the rest of it kind of take over. If speaking to students recently who are choosing to drop one of their A levels down from 4 to 3, and they go, but what does this mean for my future? So, but right now, should you be taking 4? Well, no. Okay, well, make the choice now and let the rest follow. And for me, there was never really a kind of conscious big decision point. I was working at a school, a lovely boarding school in the southwest of England. I was teaching history, and as is the nature of that kind of school career, as you move through your time, you pick up other bits of responsibility. So a couple of years into my time there, it was sort of the point where I was doing well, I was teaching effectively, and the school wanted me to sort of learn something else, the first step into management. And just so happened to be that the school at the time had introduced the IB diploma, had a growing cohort of students who wanted to go outside the UK for university. And they needed someone with a bit of sort of enthusiasm to build that program. And so that was me. And was joke, it could have been debating society. A very good friend of mine, she got debating and I got international universities. It could have been the other way around. And I did that and really loved that idea of, again, interacting with young people. And though I love the teaching, actually, I felt you can have a real direct impact. That, you know, I was one part of a bigger puzzle as a teacher, but as, you know, supporting students getting into universities that they might not have been able to do, I found a wonderful community. And so over time, I built the program. Then the head of higher education, who ran all the program at the school, which included all the UCAS applications, which was 95% of what we did, she then got promoted to a more senior position, and that became available. And I remember sort of talking in the staff room to other people saying, should I go for it? And everyone would go, well, no one else is applying because obviously it's going to be you. Like, oh, okay, well, people obviously see me then as that kind of person. So I stepped into that role, still teaching a fairly significant timetable, and really enjoyed then managing the whole program and the culture of a school. And it's head of higher education or head of careers in a UK school is a wonderful job because you're dabbling in so many different things, and it's such a great training program. And then my sort of pathway was kind of set that, you know, then I'd probably be a director of studies, and then I'd be a deputy head, and like some of my friends now would be trying to get my first headship. But then I had a message out of the blue from someone who I knew through the international stuff, saying she'd been doing some consultancy for an international school. They tried to hire somebody and couldn't find anyone they felt was a good fit. She thought would I be interested? At the time I had a young family, and my first response was, how much does it pay? Which I know is mechanistic, but when you suddenly have children, you need to think about that kind of stuff. It paid well, and I thought, well, I'll go and have an interview. And I remember being asked by the guy who was then the head of the school and became my boss, the only question he said he was going to ask me, how do we make this the best university advising department in the world? And I was sat at the airport flying back after the interview, frantically scribbling notes and thinking, this is an interesting project. And so with a young family, a significant financial boost, and a little bit of adventure, I took the decision to step away from teaching and go and be the head of college counselling at the International School of Brussels. And that was kind of the leap away from being a teacher and being a full-time university advisor. I did that for a number of years, and then for various kind of messy personal reasons, which I won't delve into on a podcast, find myself a couple of years later back in the UK as a single parent with 3 small children, one of them very, very small, needing to earn a living. And that's where then the independent university advising started, because I had the skill set, I had the contacts both in schools and in universities, and sort of out of necessity then built a business doing that, which over time became the University Guys.
Amazing. I'm listening to you and going, does he know how incredible this journey sounds? I mean, do you ever take a minute and say to yourself, I jumped off the linear path that most educators are on. I took a leap, I took on an opportunity, and here I am right now. What we didn't mention at the beginning is that you're an Oxford graduate. And I purposely did not mention that at the beginning because I didn't want that to define how people viewed this conversation. So now, as an Oxford graduate, you have taken that leap. You've done something very, very different to, I'm sure, many of your peers. When you think back to being at Oxford, do you look at that and still let it define you, as you might be hearing young people saying, I'm going to Oxford? Oxford kind of becomes their identity?
No. And I'm very cautious, like you were, of not saying it, partly because it's a fairly arrogant thing to say, and people form an impression of you if you do bring that up. And I'll be honest, that's probably something in the past I might have done. It's also kind of completely irrelevant, to be honest. And again, as a university advisor, we engage with families and this kind of stuff, but it really doesn't make much difference, to be perfectly honest, in the society that we're in today. And I know in different cultures it might do, but I was just preparing a presentation actually before we started this interview for a school. And one of the things I'm discussing now is name blind recruitment, where a lot of big firms, a lot of big employers will not put the name of the university on the admissions process for that job, the application, because they think it's kind of irrelevant. And it also, when I think back to my own journey about it all, and certainly we work with a lot of students looking at sort of Oxbridge, the students who want it mechanistically, I want to go to this university because of what it will give me, tend not to get in, certainly now when it's hyper competitive, because that's not what the university is for. Oxford and Cambridge have these extraordinarily intensive teaching processes. So you are going to sit in a room, normally 2-on-1. I was very fortunate for about half of my tutorials. I was 1-on-1 with the professor, and you are discussing what's been their life's work, and you spent a week doing it. You've got to love the subject. You've absolutely got to love the subject. And actually, when I look at the career trajectories of the people sort of I went through university with, yes, you get those name brand people, you know, the prime ministers, the FTSE 100 CEOs, all that kind of stuff. But actually, most of the people I went with are not the famous elite kind of stuff. People, what are they doing? They're doing stuff that still links them to their subject area. So I know an awful lot of teachers. You know, 2 of my best friends, godparents to my children, are both teachers. One's an English teacher, one's a languages teacher. I have people I studied with who stayed in academia and did academic research and now themselves professors at university. People have gone into the priesthood, into archive work, into, you know, scientific research, working for pharmaceutical companies. I don't have anyone in my kind of cohort who's gone into that really super massively famous route. I have a friend of mine who's a journalist and is relatively well known, but from a cohort of, I don't know, 2,500 at Oxford, maybe 50 or 60 of those will end up being famous, well-known people. The rest of them will probably be quietly getting on with their lives, linking to the academic passion that they have. And so for students, I would say, don't look at Oxford and Cambridge as like a trick to a paycheck. Look at it as, because I really love the subject. If you don't love the subject, you're not going to get in, because the professors at the interviews will figure out that you don't really like the subject. That's really the crucial thing for me. So when I think about the impact it had for me, I obviously went into a career in teaching, which was very much focused on my subject area. I remember my interview for the job that I then got, the head of history saying to me, how would you cope with learning a lot of new stuff you've never taught? And then he went, oh no, but you went to Oxford, so you're used to doing that. Well, yes, that was kind of the point. I'm used to learning a lot of history very quickly, but I was applying for something which in effect entirely relied on what I studied at university, which was my knowledge of history.
Tell us about the university, guys. What is it about? How did you come up with the name, and how does it impact the support that you're offering to families and not just their children?
So we're independent educational consultants in the kind of US model, and that's where I have my sort of memberships, IECA, HECA, Certified Educational Planner. The sort of name started as a joke of, this is not a job that people in the UK do. And so when I was sort of being with friends at social events and they've tried to introduce me to somebody else, quite often someone would say, well, he's a university guy. That kind of covers sort of what I did. And then when I was setting up on my own and building a brand, one of the first things I did was start my own podcast, and it's the University Guy podcast. It seemed like a joke, but the brand kind of worked, and then we became more than one person. We went from University Guy to University Guys, which I know is not necessarily gender neutral, and I struggle with that, but we're kind of sticking with Guys for now because it's sort of okay. If anyone has any better ideas on that, let me know, because I'm looking for a solution. But our work is working with families, really engaging with them on this process. We believe that applying to university should be fun. It should be an aspirational thing. You should be really excited about it. But so often it's stressful. People feel pressured. They feel that they have to make decisions. And a lot of those decisions are made on quite inaccurate information. Friends, family, media, how it was when your parents or relatives went. And so a lot of the work that we want to do is to not tell students what to do. Anybody can do that. It's to guide students and to help them make good decisions, which kind of comes back from my teaching philosophy. I realized very early on as a teacher that it was completely inefficient for me to spend all my time standing at the front of the class telling students stuff. It was not a sensible use of my time. And actually, really, what were the family getting from having a history graduate in the classroom? They could have just had a robot telling them what to do. The best thing was to flip the classroom, which is an idea that's very current in education, is the student should go off and just read the books and take the notes. And then when they come to class, I should engage with them about the stuff they've already researched and talk them through it and move them to the next level, what the educational philosopher Vygotsky calls the zone of proximal development. If a young person is here, you can only move them to there. Don't try and move them to here. And so what we're trying to do in university advising is say, okay, let's start with where you are. If you're saying to me, I want to go to Oxford or Cambridge, where does that come from? It probably comes from an idea of wanting the best. Okay, well, let's unpick the best. What does the best look like? What are Oxford and Cambridge actually like? And is that best for you? Maybe you need a different type of best. Are you not suited to one-on-one, two-on-one teaching? Are you a little shy and you prefer lectures? Well, let's find a different type of best with a different teaching style. And so we're trying to guide the students to make choices that they can own. And then if they build a plan based on that, then actually the rest of it should not be stressful. It should be quite exciting. And it should end up not feeling pressured that if I don't get to Oxford or if I don't get to Stanford, I'm a failure. Because actually you're saying, look, it's not about the name, it's about the experience. And if I've got a short list of 10 or 12 places where I know that experience is going to be fulfilling for me, then you're going to be fine wherever. And actually, in our experience, the students who approach it in that way do tend to be more successful and get into the really selective places, because as a very famous admissions officer, Don Bishop, who worked at Notre Dame for years and years and years, said so powerfully, these universities are not a prize to be won. Mm. They are an experience to have. And Harvard and Yale and Oxford don't want you to want them because they're the best. It's a bit like saying, I want to date Miss World because she's Miss World. She doesn't want you to date her because she's Miss World. She wants you to date her because of her personality, because you like who she is. Oxford and Cambridge and other hyper-selected universities don't want you to want them because they're number one. They want you to want them because of the experience that they will offer you. So students who we work with, we want to get them to that point of going, if I don't get into Oxford, it's fine because I love Bristol, or I'd be super happy at Warwick because of the experience it's offering. And that's like the fundamental part of what we're trying to do.
Amazing. We are singing the same tune and trying to help young people understand the depth of the choices that they're making. As we're coming to an end of this conversation, so much more that I'd love to ask you, but we definitely do need to be wrapping it up. I want to take you back to your 3 career tips. You shared with me that number 1 is don't focus on the brand name, focus on what's right for you. We heard you talk about that today in this conversation. You also say at number 2, don't listen to the outside voices that mean well but are ill-informed. And your number 3 is focus on lifestyle and not just money. So I want to take you back to that number 2. And I say, let's go to number 2 first, because I think these voices, these outside voices, are well-intentioned, as you said, but ill-informed. And I think it comes back to this, I don't know, I think it's like a stereotype that anybody can do this because we all did it ourselves back. We look back at when our influencers went to school and who helped them and who guided them. But you mentioned earlier that society looks different right now and young people are going through a different journey and even looking at career readiness for that future. We definitely need to be looking at this career decision-making process differently. How do you go about that? Because you'll be working with young people, but behind every young person is the person paying the bill. Yeah. How do you encourage that outside voice to listen to a different type of suggestion than to what they might be used to hearing or maybe even used to saying?
Yeah, so as a former history teacher, I trade in analogies, and analogies are just what we use all the time. And so I'm trying to frame conversations in a way that those outside voices can maybe use to defend their child's decision to their outside voices, which is obviously part of what they have to do. If you're saying Johnny's got 3 A stars at A level and he's applying to a university that I haven't heard of, then you might have, as a parent, other people questioning that. So I'm trying to sort of frame the conversations in ways that they feel that they can own it. But an awful lot of it is trying to sort of present, again, information for families to use. We're not trying to tell them what to do, but to give them accurate information. And I tend to use sort of fairly simply graspable information points to help them do it. So, for example, for the USA, and a lot of the students we work with here in the UK want to go to the USA. And so the starting point of a lot of conversations is, I'd like to go to the Ivy League. I go, fantastic, wonderful. What is it about the culture of 8 universities in the northeast of the USA that play sports that appeals to you? They look at me and go, I'm sorry, I want to go to the best universities. So, oh, but you said Ivy League, that's not the best universities. You see the family going like, okay, hang on, we haven't quite understood this. And so let's unpack it. And quite often I will say to a student, like, okay, if you want the Ivy League, give me the name of the 8 Ivy League universities, and almost certainly Stanford or MIT will come up. Go, well, hang on, that's not an Ivy League university. Now, all of a sudden, this concept of the zone of proximal development, the student's understanding was here, and I've taken it a little bit there, taken the family beyond. They go, okay, well, maybe we don't mean Ivy League. And now I've got an opening to then delve into what they're looking for. The same for the UK. We work with a lot of international students with Oxford and Cambridge. And I say, okay, well, bear in mind, Oxford and Cambridge are not the most selective universities in the UK. Again, you get a sort of look of bafflement. What do you mean? They're the best. And you go, well, they might be, but they're not the most selective for a very simple reason. You can't apply to Oxford and Cambridge. You have a forced choice in the system. So what I say is, imagine that we cloned you. One clone went for Oxford, one clone went for Cambridge, but the other 4 universities on your UCAS list were identical. Those other 4 universities have 2 applications, whereas Oxford and Cambridge only have 1. Therefore, places like LSE, Imperial, UCL for many courses are almost twice as selective as Oxford or Cambridge. And again, presenting very objective, very understandable information to a family to make them go, maybe this isn't quite as simple as a newspaper headline or Joe in the office makes me think. Potentially I need to delve into this and understand it. And once you've kind of opened that idea of this zone of proximal development, that you've moved them from what they thought they knew to what is the next step, that's when the relationship of trust can come in, and you can say, okay, well, now let's again unpack this. Let's look at it. Let's move it slightly forwards. And we're not telling them what to do. We're just presenting information. My colleague Melanie, who's a wonderful careers counsellor, I say the best university advisor in the UK, talks a lot about challenging the statements that students will make, not in a kind of forceful way, but you say, okay, well, why do you think that? Why have you said that? Can you give me that? And again, just helping them to reflect on where their assumptions are and moving them to the next level.
Incredible. David, so much to ask, but I will stop it after this last question.
Of course.
You're now an entrepreneur. How did teaching prepare you for the role as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, that's scary. The idea of saying I'm an entrepreneur, which I guess I must be, but it's not. I mean, I still think I'm a teacher. I will probably go back into the classroom one day because I do love history. Didn't like marking, but do like history. I think it comes down to kind of the skill set. We use the Moresby profile with all the students we work with, particularly for the UK, which is a wonderful tool looking at students' own aptitudes and personalities. And in that, it's looking at the lifestyle, as we mentioned, one of my tips. I like working with people. I like variety, spontaneity. I like talking, as you all have realized from listening to me for half an hour. And so that kind of skill set of taking information, thinking about ways of delivering it, and then preparing it with somebody where they are is the same what I'm doing. I'm not very good at the kind of marketing, sales, business side of it, but I found the niche for what I can do. The other bits, I have a wonderful team of people who help with those bits of it. But for me, and I talk back to how I came into this, as I said, through slightly difficult personal situations, I found myself as a single parent. The lifestyle of doing this work, of being an entrepreneur, was what I needed, and has enabled me to do this kind of work. So I think if your students are looking at sort of thinking about being an entrepreneur, my advice would be good at something first. Build up your skill set and whatever that might be. And I was fortunate to then segue that into a business. But what I do as an entrepreneur is completely different from what my brother does with his web design company. The actual work that we're doing today is fundamentally different. And I would say I have good accountants and marketing people who do the bits that I can't do.
And if I would have told that 15-year-old David, you're not going to be a history teacher, you're going to be an entrepreneur one day.
Yeah.
How do you think that younger David would have responded?
I would not have believed you in the slightest.
And I am loving this, because this is what we're talking about with young people. You don't need to figure out the life plan. Just get started and take what you enjoy, like you were saying, really enjoy, and then get that started. David, I really, really enjoyed having you with me. Definitely going to be having more conversations, but we have to bring this one to a close for today. It has been such a pleasure learning from you, and your journey is incredibly interesting and definitely insightful, not just for young people, but for parents and for educators thinking about what should they do on that next career journey for themselves. And that brings us right to the end. We were speaking with David Hawkins, who is the founder of the University Guys. And if you liked this interview, you're definitely going to want to be following the University Guys and learning more about the work they do, and definitely very insightful information to help you unwrap what you think you know and then piece together some of the realities of how those university applications are looking different today. Thank you for watching, and we will see you at our next Let's Talk Careers with Miss V.